So this is a tough one. I don't know if I'll end up posting this. I already have a singing session that I haven't listened to. Don't know if I'll post that one. The behind the scenes stuff where you're working on something, maybe a voice lesson, practice session. Do you want to make that public? Probably not unless you're already a great singer, right? I don't know. People can learn from that though. And there's a certain amount of pride and humility. Aren't they the same thing? When you display something like that. But this is completely different. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. As a Christian in this post-Christian age, there's a lot of apologetics that we do. What we believe really doesn't fit with what the world believes. And that's exactly what the New Testament says. So it's not a surprise to people who study the New Testament. It's not a surprise to people who know about Christianity that the world and Christians have opposite worldviews. But we're coming from times, or we are told that we're coming from times when there was a much more Christian basis to our society. So I always break it up into the ancient world, Greek and Roman, Hellenistic, Mediterranean world becoming Christian, Christianity spreading to larger parts of the world, and then our tradition being descended from the medieval European tradition, where it seemed like, from what we're told, it seems like everybody believed in more Christian ideas than they do now. And then, of course, with the age of expansion to the New World, almost the whole world is exposed to Christianity, and Christianity remains the largest religion in the world. But I do say we're in a post-Christian age because the leaders and the way things are headed is back like it used to be before the Roman Empire Christianized from its leaders. So, in the medieval conception, there's heaven and hell and purgatory and limbo, and people seem to have believed in wanting very much to avoid hell. Whereas in today's world, it's hard for us to believe in hell. So that's a huge change, right? People in my culture, and what the predecessor to my culture, believed in a place of eternal torment. And now, we really can't wrap our minds around that. I know that in this earthly realm, people can get used to anything. And the most horrible conditions can remain horrible, but you still get used to them. Or you would get used to them. And how can you even have anything for eternity? We don't understand eternity. We don't understand the idea that there is a place of eternal torment. It just doesn't resonate. So people say that they believe in hell, but they don't really imagine what it is. They don't really see it as something that could possibly be real. So this huge change, how did this happen? Well, obviously, it's with a focus on the temporal, focus on what you can see, focus on what you can document and prove, as opposed to thinking about the mysterious great beyond. But it's just, it's hard to wrap it's hard to wrap my mind around it, around the concepts themselves, but also about how society or people switch their focus so much. Just kind of ignore it, forget about it, instead of live their whole life to avoid it. So if we go back before the Christian era, we of course have the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and that made its way into Western medieval consciousness. But the main group of people in the Roman Empire, for instance, the seedbed of my culture, they were afraid of gods. They had lots of gods. And gods varied according to place. Gods varied according to powers, and they were hooking up with one another. They were fighting each other. They were supporting certain heroes. They were thwarting certain heroes. They were not a pantheistic source. They were not one benevolent god with lieutenants. They were competing entities. And so appeasing competing entities involved worshiping more than one, and worshiping in more than one way. And maybe worship is not the best word because of Christianity. The definition of worship has changed. But being a devotee of these gods, some people engaged in festivals, some people engaged in rituals, some people engaged in sacrifices, some people engaged in creeds, ways of thinking, initiations, all kinds of things. And of course there are parallels in every religion around the world to some of these things. But the big change that I can get my hands on is how religion became from mysterious and debauched to respectable. After Christianity, it's hard to imagine that religion used to involve what we would call sexual debauchery. So we have changed our definition of religion to be something good. But people in the past were considering themselves religious when they were doing things that were bad. So when we say things like religion versus spirituality, that's a little closer to what was going on before the dominance of Christianity. So you had temples, which were places of sacrifice and blood. And that was considered religious. That was considered something that the god or goddess wanted. Self-mutilations, murder of enemies, murder of children, murder of slaves. Things in our culture that are still not accepted, thank goodness, were accepted as expressions of piety, expressions of doing what a God wanted you to do. So, the dominance of Christianity took that away, and a place of worship was still a place where you might sing, was still a place where you might have a creed, still a place where you might have art, and you would have stories and legends and instruction about how to live, but it did not any longer contain the things that we would deem unrespectable. So Christianity made the world's religions respectable. And all of those unrespectable things still existed. There's always people doing perversions. There's always people doing murders. There's always people doing debauched things, but they weren't doing them in the name of religion. They were seen as counterculture. They were secret. They were no longer supported by the state. They were hushed, spoken about in whispers. And sure, people who engage in the black arts might consider themselves religious, but society as a whole no longer considered any of those things as part of religion. Religion was good, those things were evil. Those people, right? It's real easy for a group of people to point at other people and say, those people deserved hell, according to the vast majority of society. So we've got the Inquisition and the burning of the witches and the hanging of the witches and the search to root out this evil. But all those rituals and things went underground, symbols went underground, still existed, and I suppose by many less people than when the huge temples and the huge businesses of idol making and so forth were a big part of society and everybody knew about them. So there's a big change, if you believe in good versus evil, you can say that good triumphed over evil. Evil had to hide, evil had to go underground, and less people engaged in evil. Less people even knew that these evil things were happening. Okay. So, people used to believe in a lot of gods, and because the gods had different points of view and different requirements and different, then religion was splintered. But when the world started believing in one God, and it was a good God, and so everybody was expected to do good things as part of religion, the world, the main focus of people, the main group of people, the number of people, changed to thinking that religion was good, God was good, people should be good, religion should be a force for good, not a force for getting what you need out of the universe, not a force for saving yourself, but a force for saving the whole world, and God is good. So what we've got today is people who don't believe because they don't believe that a good God would send people to hell. So, if people don't believe in God, why are they so sure that God is good? Right? They don't even believe in God. So, Christianity, Christendom, has backed itself into a corner. If you have lots of gods, you can say that it's not really good and bad. It's just different factions with different interests, with different wants and needs and results. In other words, like political countries. One ascends, one descends. One's doing well, one's doing poorly, one grows in territory, one shrinks in territory. So a competing list of byproducts and results and interests. But if there's one God in control of everything, omniscient, omnipresent, what's the other one? Omnipotent. Then how can there be contrast? So we now have all these people who believe in the God that took away all the badness, not all the badness, but took away the dominance of fake religion, evil religion, whatever, but can't believe in it because it's not consistent. But they only think that God would be just and would be omniscient and would be good because of the very God that they are now rejecting. So if we look at things from the standard of the Bible, so starting with the Hebrew Bible, making its way into the New Testament with Hellenization, and then being interpreted for 1,000 medieval years, 500 medieval years, into whatever I was taught. We've got people who have one foot in that world, and the other foot they just won't place in that world because things don't make sense to them. But I would offer, as someone who never left Christianity, and who knows, right? What does the future bring? But as someone who is used to, in this post-Christian age, hearing people apologize for Christianity. Oh, God cares for you, bad things happen, but you just have to trust Him. Oh, bad things happen, it's the consequence of your own rebellion, but just turn your life over. Oh, bad things happen, we just don't understand. In the end, in the sweet by and by, everything will be fine. But I want to back up a bit. You have a belief system. You, each one of us. So you have a belief system. And it's a result of the tradition you're from, probably the traditions that I've already talked about, the traditions that I'm from. You have beliefs from those systems, but you also have beliefs from your own experience and your own thought process. And some people thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Other people just kind of have their opinions without knowing where they got them from. tell which side of the fence I'm on, but I'm not saying that. Well, let me just back up even further. You have your beliefs. Very few of them did you come to from your own volition, right? You've been assigned some beliefs, you've projected some beliefs, and you are a product of your age, just like I'm a product of my age, a post-Christian age. Who do you think you are that you get to decide how fair God is? Let's just lay it on the line. You can see some aspect of creation. If you can see, you have some idea of the beauty in art. You have some idea of the goodness of faith and hope and trust and love and peace. You have some idea of these large concepts that are way beyond you. You have some idea of all of those things. You might be a musician who has a lot of knowledge about music, or you might just like a couple songs, but you have knowledge of beauty. You have knowledge of truth to some degree. You have knowledge of the beauty of relationships. You have knowledge of these concepts. You have knowledge of this world. And it might be a little knowledge, it might be something you've studied for decades. And you get to decide how fair the world is. You get to decide beyond this world, above this world, below this world, beyond, with the source, the Godhead. You get to decide if that makes sense. Yeah, I guess to a certain extent you do. But we have to admit our limitations. We have to admit that it's extremely unlikely that if I cannot even choose to have the job I want, to have the wife I want, to have the kid I want, if I can't even choose some of those things, all of those things, that somewhere beyond space and time, I chose to come to this world to learn some lessons. And I chose to be born here, and I chose my parents, and I chose to come back, and someday I'll choose not to come back and return to, like, what? Really? So you think, right? It's so easy for me to talk about you. You think that you can look at the inconsistencies in someone else's belief system and say, I'm just going to believe in nothing. Okay, do we do that in any other endeavor of life? Do we look at someone's job and see that sometimes they're not good at their job, sometimes they hate their job, sometimes they have to do things they don't want to do, and we just say, well, I'm not going to get a job. You need a job? And you don't let my problems and my inconsistencies keep you from getting a job? Do we look at someone else's family and say, oh, that family has problems? So-and-so is abusive. So-and-so doesn't really love the other one. so-and-so she only stays with him because he's rich. He only loves her because she's beautiful. So I'm not going to have a family. That family is not a good family. So there are no good families. So I'm not going to have a... Like, what are we doing with religion? And how did we get here? Where people think that they get to cafeteria style, take a little of this, take a little of that. This makes sense to me, therefore I believe it. This doesn't make sense to me, therefore I will ignore it. How did we get to a place where people ignore hell? In the medieval world, it's like the most important thing. You don't want to go there, right? And now it's like, oh, well, that can't possibly be true. So we know that ostensibly, we know that nominally, more people believe in hell, or they say they believe in hell, today than any other time in the world, because there's more Christians now than there have ever been. And of course, some other religions have things like hell, parallels to hell in their religion too. So right this second, more people say they believe in hell than have ever said they believed in hell, or possibly believed in hell in the past, ever. But even the people that believe in hell don't believe in hell. Like, we just cannot imagine it, because we've all accepted the idea that God is great and God is good. But it's only because of the good, great God that the concept of hell even entered into our existence. So we have this cognitive distance of holding beliefs in balance with one another that don't go together. What if there is one? We don't do this in any other endeavor. We don't say in any other instance, believe whatever you want to believe. We don't say that. We say, take the medical treatment or avoid the medical treatment. Not, if you believe in the medical treatment, take it. And if you don't believe in the medical treatment, don't take it. If you believe you can walk across the road without looking twice, please walk across the road without looking twice. But if you don't believe, we don't do that in any other endeavor. But with religion, people think that they get to decide. And that as long as you believe something... What? What are you talking about? There is a framework of this world, whether we understand it or not. And there is a framework of the world to come. And its framework, its reality, has absolutely nothing to do with whether I know about it or not. Go back to the natural world. Nobody knew about some animal that lived across the world somewhere, but it was there. Nobody knew about the undersea volcanoes till they were discovered, but they were there. No one knew that the gas that makes up most of the air is nitrogen, but it always was. Not always, but it was. You don't get to decide if something's true. that's why I think I should study it and come to some conclusions. Not conclusions about what I want to be true, but conclusions about what is true. What things are true. So, I recognize that I'm doing the same logical, circuitous things everybody's doing because we're just people and we're making sense of our world from the place where we are, right? So I have these assumptions, just like you have these assumptions, and we're moving towards or ignoring them. And I think that just like science, we should build upon the knowledge that has been gained from the past. We don't get to rewrite history. And we don't get to start religion at ground zero. Things have been determined. And we are where we are, and we stand on the shoulders of that knowledge. And of course, I'm going to come to different conclusions than somebody else. But I don't have the luxury or the hubris of just making it all up. I don't get to decide that there's another animal undiscovered and tell you about how it is and tell you what it looks like and where it's found and what it eats and how long it lives if I don't have any evidence for that. I don't get to say, oh, the air is mostly made up of hydrogen just because I don't know it's made up of nitrogen. I don't get to make up any of the reality. And whatever happens after this world is reality. And you don't get to make it up, and I don't get to make it up. And certainly I may be wrong, you may be wrong, all of us may be wrong. But it's not because of us. It's not about us. There's something else, and we're looking at it, we're given glimpses of it, and we need to find out about it. Not create it, not approve it, not ignore it. Let's find out what it is. And if it includes hell, let's avoid hell. Duh. I mean, how sad to find yourself somewhere that you never believed and thinking that your unbelief is going to save you from it. That's just ludicrous. We don't act like that. We don't think like that in any aspect of life other than the most important one. And we've got millions of people doing it right now. Millions of people. All right, so that's today's edition of Driving Perilously and Parked Perilously. It's a hard one. And I hope you got something out of it. It's important.